Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupini Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Welcome everyone to these series of talks on the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So far, we have been studying the monastic disciples, and one of the things that we should keep in mind is that these disciples would have been able to start a different organization or a sect in their own right, but they were able to withhold that and to be under the banner of Sri Ramakrishna, because each of them had achieved very high spiritual heights. And if you go to India now, you will find many sects around, and it is like a smorgasbord. You choose what you want because there are so many different sects available in sects or sanghas in India. But these disciples, monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, had the ability to begin a sect themselves in their own right, but they didn't. So now today we will discuss the life of Swami Vijnanananda, who was one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Last Tuesday was the Tithi Puja, or birth anniversary of Swami Vijnanananda. Vijnanananda was called Hari Prasanna Chattopadhyay before he became a monk. He was the fourth president of the Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission. He was born on Friday, 30 October 1868 in Etawah, Uttar Pradesh. His father's name was Taraknath Chattopadhyay, who was employed by the British government. Hari Prasanna was the eldest of 6 children. There were 2 boys and 4 girls in the family. Because of his job, Hari Prasanna's father moved around the country. The children resided with their mother in Kashi. The mother's name was Nakuleshwari Devi. Hari Prasanna began his primary education in Kashi. In 1879, Nakuleshwari and the children moved to Bulgaria, close to Dakshineshwar, Kolkata. Hari Prasanna entered the Hari School. In 1882, he passed the entrance examination. In 1883, Hari Prasanna entered St. Xavier's College. Here, Sarat Chakravarti, later Swami Saradananda, and Ramananda Chattopadhyay, later editor of Prabhashi magazine, were his classmates. In 1885, Hari Prasanna passed the first arts examination from St. Xavier's College. After that, he moved to the Patna College in Bihar to study for his BA degree. There is not much known about Hari Prasanna or Swami Vijnanananda's early life. A couple of incidents that are known are the ones once Hari Prasanna's mother accused him of doing something wrong which he had not. Hari Prasanna was taken back and incensed. In anger, he tore off his sacred thread and said that I am not a Brahmin if I tell a lie. The next day, they received a message that Taraknath Hari Prasanna's father had died in Quetta in Afghanistan. Hari Prasanna narrated another incident from his boyhood. It happened while the family was staying at Bulgaria, Kolkata. He heard a gunshot in a bamboo grove behind their home. He rushed to the grove and found a monkey lying on the ground. He then distinctly heard the monkey chant Rama Rama and then die with folded hands. Hari Prasanna felt that monkeys are the devotees of Rama who die chanting Ramchandra's name. Hari Prasanna's meetings with Sri Ramakrishna. The initial meetings that Hari Prasanna had with Sri Ramakrishna were not really eventful. He first saw him in 1875 at Bulgaria when he was 7 years old. That took place at Jayagopal Sen's garden house where Keshab Sen was staying. Sri Ramakrishna came to visit Keshab. The second time that Hari Prasanna saw Sri Ramakrishna was at Diwan Govinda Mukhopadhyay's residence at Bulgaria near Dakshineshwar. On this occasion, he seems to have seen Sri Ramakrishna in Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna was being supported by Baburam and Narendra was also there. Hari Prasanna, in his reminiscences of this event, mentioned something about Ramakrishna's spine or back. From the base of his spine right up to his head, the whole column had become inflated like a thick rope. Let me just repeat that. Hari Prasanna, in his reminiscences of this event, mentioned something about Sri Ramakrishna's spine or back. From the base of his spine right up to his head, the whole column had become inflated like a thick rope. This is an interesting third-party observation because in Swami Saradananda's Leela Prasanga, it is mentioned that when Sri Ramakrishna was practicing his Hanuman Bhav, his tail bone seems to have extended to look like a monkey, and he would jump around like a monkey. Swami Vijnanananda's reminiscences is another piece of supporting evidence to suggest that there are physiological changes in Sri Ramakrishna associated with his spiritual practices and experiences. So this is, I do not know if Swami Vijnanananda had read Swami Saradananda's Leela Prasanga, but Swami Saradanandaji says that when Sri Ramakrishna practiced this Hanuman Bhava, his tailbone seemed to have extended. Well, here, Swami Vijnanananda, in observing Sri Ramakrishna's backbone, felt that it had become bigger. So this is another piece of supporting evidence to suggest that there are physiological changes that happen in a sadhaka's body when they experience spiritual truths. Hari Prasanna's first visit to Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar was probably on 26 November 1883. This time he went there with Sarath, later Swami Saradananda, and Barada Pal, both fellow students of St. Xavier's College, at which Hari Prasanna was enrolled. But the master was about to go to Mani Mallik's residence in Kolkata. Sri Ramakrishna invited the boys to go with him to Kolkata, which the boys agreed to. But when Hari Prasanna reached back home, he got a scolding from his mother for having visited Sri Ramakrishna. A lot of the disciples used to get scolded by their parents when they would visit Sri Ramakrishna, because they all thought that Sri Ramakrishna was mad and he was trying to trap youngsters. While Hari Prasanna was in college, he would regularly meet Sri Ramakrishna. He would occasionally spend the night and observe Sri Ramakrishna at close quarters. I have discussed before with some of the other disciples how they used to spend the night with Sri Ramakrishna. You must remember that this gave the disciples a chance to see if Sri Ramakrishna was really practicing what he preached. They were able to observe him at close quarters and watch him to see if he was just a preacher or if he lived the ideas that he preached. So it was only Hari Prasanna, but most of the young disciples would have the opportunity to closely observe Sri Ramakrishna's life while staying overnight with him. Sometimes the interaction between the youth and Sri Ramakrishna would be unexpected. Once Hari Prasanna had an interesting experience with Sri Ramakrishna. Hari Prasanna was seated in Sri Ramakrishna's room, which was full of people. Then everybody got up and left, leaving only Sri Ramakrishna and Hari Prasanna. Hari Prasanna thought it was also time for him to return, so he got up. Then Sri Ramakrishna asked him if he knew how to wrestle. Hari Prasanna said that he did. Then Sri Ramakrishna challenged him. Before I continue, it is important for you all to have some idea of the difference in size between Sri Ramakrishna and Hari Prasanna. Sri Ramakrishna was relatively thin, tender, and very supple. Hari Prasanna was big male, tall and hefty. If you compare Sri Ramakrishna and Hari Prasanna just on the basis of physical strength, Hari Prasanna was no match for Sri Ramakrishna. But the opposite happened. Sri Ramakrishna came close to Hari Prasanna, grabbed his hand and pushed him back. Then Sri Ramakrishna held Hari Prasanna with a strong grip. It was then that Hari Prasanna felt something like an electric shock enter into him from Sri Ramakrishna. As a result of that, Hari Prasanna became limp, losing his physical strength. Then the master released him and said, "Well, you are the winner." He then sat down. Hari Prasanna felt as though he was engulfed by a stream of bliss and felt that he was conquered by the master. Then Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "It is important for you to come here often." This is an instance of a disciple like Hari Prasanna feeling an infusion of power at Sri Ramakrishna's touch. There is another incident when Hari Prasanna felt some infusion of spiritual power from Sri Ramakrishna. Once Hari Prasanna did not come to Dakshineshwar for a long time. Sri Ramakrishna noticed this and sent for him. When Hari Prasanna finally came, Sri Ramakrishna asked him why he was absent for so long. To this, Hari Prasanna replied that he did not feel like coming and that he wasn't having deep meditation. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "What do you mean you cannot meditate?" Then Sri Ramakrishna asked Hari Prasanna to come near him. When he did this, Sri Ramakrishna drew something on his tongue with his finger. Hari Prasanna says that as a result, he felt an unspeakable bliss and joy. When Sri Ramakrishna instructed him Then Sri Ramakrishna instructed him to go to the Panchavati and meditate. Hari Prasanna found it difficult to walk to the Panchavati because of the master's touch, but he managed to get himself there and sat for meditation. Hari Prasanna says that he lost outward consciousness. When he regained his ordinary state of mind, Sri Ramakrishna was sitting beside him and rubbing his body with his hands. Then Sri Ramakrishna asked him, "How was your meditation?" Hari Prasanna replied that it was very good. Then Sri Ramakrishna said to him that from now on he would have deep meditation. Sri Ramakrishna also asked him if he had had a vision. To this, Hari Prasanna replied that he had a vision and then proceeded to describe it to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna also gave Hari Prasanna a number of instructions relating to spiritual and monastic life. Hari Prasanna reminisced that he could not fathom the amount of love that Sri Ramakrishna had for him. This is a common observation from all of the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. They felt that the love that they felt from Sri Ramakrishna was not even comparable to the love that they received from their parents. So this is also a commonality that we get with the other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. This is a common testimony of all the people that came close to Sri Ramakrishna. Once Hari Prasanna asked Sri Ramakrishna if God was with form or without form. This is a question that also comes up in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna gave the same answer that he gave in the Gospel. This goes to show that the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, as a piece of evidence, coincides with other types of evidence found in different reminiscences. Because in the Gospel is one source of evidence, and we have Sri Ramakrishna talking about certain things like if God has form or if God is without form. Similarly, in other people like Swami Vijnananandaji's reminiscences, we also get certain things which correspond to the Gospel. So that goes to show that the Gospel and the reminiscences are valid forms of evidence. That goes to show that Sri Ramakrishna's answers in the Gospel are authentic. The reply that Sri Ramakrishna gave was God is with form as well as without form. And again, he is beyond both form and formlessness. He added that the cot is God, this glass is God, the utensils are God, the wall is God, everything is God. After Sri Ramakrishna had said this, Hari Prasanna had an experience and an inner transformation that lifted him above ordinary consciousness. He felt that his heart was illumined and he saw the light of Brahman everywhere. Hari Prasanna did not have that much contact with Sri Ramakrishna as some of the other disciples. Sri Ramakrishna once, pointing to his picture, said, "I dwell in this picture. Meditate on me." Hari Prasanna replied, "I will." When Sri Ramakrishna passed away, Hari Prasanna was most probably at Patna College, studying for his Bachelor of Arts degree. He had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna standing in front of him. Hari Prasanna wondered, why is Sri Ramakrishna standing in front of me? How did he come here? The next day, he read in the Basumati paper that Sri Ramakrishna had passed away in the company of Swami Vivekananda. Hari Prasanna joined the other monks in Alambazar in 1896 after working as a civil engineer. He was compelled to work as an engineer because his father had passed in his support his mother and the rest of his family. Swami Vivekananda returned from the West in 1897, after which he travelled around India. Swami Vivekananda took Hariprasanna with him to western and northern India. Travelling through Rajputana, Swami Vivekananda discussed with Hariprasanna his plans for a Ramakrishna temple, which synthesized different styles of architecture from India's history. After they returned from their travels, Hariprasanna sketched some plans for the temple based on Swamiji's ideas and what he had seen. In March 1898, the land for Belur Math was purchased, while the monastery was shifted to Nilamba Mukherjee's garden house. With this new acquisition, Hariprasanna again was engaged for remodeling and putting up some new buildings. On 9 May 1899, Hariprasanna formally took sannyasa like the other direct disciples had done earlier in front of a photo of Sri Ramakrishna. He then became Swami Vijnanananda, but Swami Vivekananda would call him Peshan. Swami Vijnanananda was also involved with the construction of a ghat or embankment in front of the monastery at Belur. Swami Vijnanananda occupied the room next to Swami Vivekananda's room in Belur Math. Swami Chetanananda relates a couple of incidents relating to Swami Vivekananda being awakened in the middle of the night because of the suffering of people due to natural and man-made disasters. These incidents show how deeply Swami Vivekananda felt for the plight of humanity. To those of you who have read Swami Vivekananda's letters will know how he felt for the neglected masses in India. Even during or after the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, he used to cry for the marginalized masses of India while sleeping in luxury beds. On one occasion, Swami Vijnanananda questioned Swami Vivekananda's close association with Western women. Swami Vijnanananda thought that Swami Vivekananda's approach was contrary to Sri Ramakrishna's teaching of renouncing women and gold. This is not the only instance of a direct disciple questioning Swami Vivekananda's method of work. Swami Yogananda had also questioned him before all the service activities that the organization was engaged in. Swami Vivekananda's reply when he was thus questioned by Swami Vijnanananda was that Swami Vijnanananda should not confine his understanding of Sri Ramakrishna to only what he was instructed on. Sri Ramakrishna had previously warned Hariprasanna to keep away from women, but Swami Vivekananda added that Sri Ramakrishna was broader than that. Sri Ramakrishna had eradicated the demarcation between men and women in the mind of Swami Vivekananda. He said that there was no gender or sex in the Atman. Sri Ramakrishna came not just for women, but for women, not just for men, but for women as well. Sri Ramakrishna's instructions to Swami Vivekananda were very different. What Swami Vivekananda said to Swami Vijnanananda next is very significant to the women's movement of feminism. Let me digress for a little. Since the last century, the women's movement has been gaining traction and exerting a great influence on changing society through advocacy and political participation. In earlier centuries, women were considered the property of men, like the ownership of slaves in olden times. Except for New Zealand, other countries only gave the right to vote and to be represented on a jury in the 20th century to women. New Zealand gave that right to women to vote and jury duty in 1893, Australia in 1902, and the United States in 1920, in the same year that the Holy Mother passed away. So, with the women's movement is mostly a product of the 20th century, because it was mostly in 20th century that the suffragette movements became powerful, and they were able to impart the right to vote and the right to serve on a duty to women, which were enjoyed only by men previously. So this is something that we see in the 20th century. Swami Vivekananda, who was way ahead of his time, said the following to Swami Vijnanananda, and I quote, "Can a nation rise or become great unless the primordial energy that lies dormant in women is awakened? I have traveled all over the world and found that women are neglected more or less everywhere. But this is particularly deplorable in India. That is why our nation has been degraded to such an extent. As soon as there is an awakening in women, you will see that the whole nation will rise up in its pristine glory. For that reason, the Holy Mother has come. With her advent, there has been a stir among the women of all countries. This is just a beginning. You will see many more things later." Now in 2025, there is a greater parity between men and women in the West. In Saudi Arabia and other places, this is not the case. In the West, whether it is political participation through more women in politics, greater parity in pay between men and women in the same occupation and position, breaking down of the glass ceiling in corporate settings, the women's movement has achieved much for the cause of women. What Swami Vivekananda foresaw was the spiritual basis to the empowerment of women, rather than the physical or sexual freedom that the women's movement has concerned itself with. The women's movement is very body conscious, or confine their identities to their bodies. In other words, they believe that they are the owners of their bodies, and as a result are able to do whatever they like with it. This is one area in which Swami Vivekananda would differ from the women's movement and modern feminism. Swamiji would differ and say that the real individuality of women is in the spirit or Atman, not the body. Confining oneself to the body is limiting oneself, like the pro-abortion or pro-choice lobby in America. I apologize for this digression, as this is not a lecture on Swami Vivekananda, but it shows the concern that Swami Vivekananda had for women and the role that Holy Mother was going to play. And he attempted to educate his brother disciples on these issues. Swami Vijnanananda in Allahabad, India. It was Swami Vivekananda who again advised Swami Vijnanananda to start a center in Allahabad. After the construction work in Belur Math. Allahabad is a famous city because of the confluence of three rivers, Ganges, Yamuna and Saraswati. In Allahabad, Swami Vijnanananda stayed at the Brahmavadin Club that had been started earlier. The members of the Brahmavadin Club practiced meditation, prayer, study of the scriptures, sang bhajans, and discussed spiritual topics. Swami Vijnanananda, after his arrival at Allahabad, started to lead these activities. Swami Vijnanananda also published a number of books while he was in Allahabad for 38 years. In 1910, a house and a plot of land was purchased for the purposes of a center. Swami Vijnanananda had to take a loan of rupees 4,100 for the sake of buying a house in Varanasi. Swami Vijnanananda went to Varanasi to oversee the construction of the Ramakrishna Mission Home of Service in 1909. While he was there, he visited the surrounding places like Saranath, where the Buddha had given his first sermon. Pilgrimage. In the latter part of his life, Swami Vijnanananda visited many parts of India, which he had not done in his youth like the other direct disciples. He visited the south like Madras and other places, the west like Dwaraka and other places, Sri Lanka, Orissa, Bangladesh, Burma, among others. Swami Vijnanananda's spiritual experiences. When we had the talk on Swami Advaitananda 2 weeks back, we discussed spiritual experiences and the ways to distinguish between genuine and false experiences. Swami Vijnanananda, like Swami Brahmananda, had many visions of spiritual experiences. Sometimes when narrating his spiritual experiences to people, he would realize that the audience was skeptical or agnostic about these. On one occasion he said, and I quote, "You see, Rakal Maharaj and I have had all sorts of visions. Both of us have little sleep at night, so we see these things. You are all young Bengalis. You do not have to believe them." End quote. So he sensed that when he talked about his spiritual experiences, that people would be skeptical and would question them. On another occasion, Swami Vijnanananda said, and I quote, "The test of a true vision is this. It leaves a lasting spiritual impression on the mind that generates awareness and bliss. I still get joy when I think of that form of the Divine Mother. So it is up to you if you want to believe in visions or spiritual experiences or not. But the thing that you should keep in mind is that Swami Vijnanananda was one of Sri Ramakrishna's most tertiary educated disciples. He was not only educated in the humanities through his Bachelor of Arts degree, reading philosophers like Hegel, Kant, among others, but he was also educated in the applied sciences like civil engineering. I do not know if civil engineering was a postgraduate degree in those days or if it was a bachelor's degree. But still in those days, it still would have been very hard to get into. He also worked as a district engineer in Ghazipur, Uttar Pradesh, before he joined the monastery in Alambazar. So even if you doubt Gopal and Ma's experiences or even Sri Ramakrishna's experiences, it would be hard to doubt Swami Vijnanananda because he was trained like us. I have already mentioned the experience of Hari Prasanna on Sri Ramakrishna's passing. Now I will try to narrate some of the other experiences that he had. I am doing this for our encouragement. A. Swami Vivekananda's passing away in July 1902. When Swami Vijnanananda passed away, when Swami Vivekananda passed away, Swami Vijnanananda was in Allahabad. When he was meditating in the shrine of the Brahmavadin Club, he saw a vision of Swami Vivekananda sitting on the lap of Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Vijnanananda was taken back by this vision. He wondered what had happened. The next day, he received a message from Belur Math that Swami Vivekananda had passed away. B. Vision of Mother Triveni as a young girl in Allahabad. Another recorded vision that Swami Vijnanananda had was while he was in Allahabad. He used to bathe in the Triveni or confluence every morning before sunrise. The Triveni is a confluence of three rivers, Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati. One day after his bath, he was chanting a hymn to Mother Ganges. He had a vision. Mother Triveni appeared to him as a young girl with three braids down her back and disappeared again in the water. He was overwhelmed by that vision. After he had finished his chanting, when he resumed to walk, he saw the girl again, walking towards the ashrama. After a while, she disappeared. Swami Vijnanananda disclosed this vision to Swami Brahmananda. Brahmananda confirmed that it was genuine. C. Vision of Shiva in Varanasi, most probably in 1909. Another incident happened in Varanasi. Swami Vijnanananda had gone there to supervise the construction of the Ramakrishna Mission Home of Service. On his way to the ashrama from the train station, his horse-drawn carriage rolled over, and one of his legs was twisted inside the wheel. The accident caused him severe pain, and he had a temperature and a headache. After the accident, Swami Vijnanananda complained to Lord Vishwanath, or Lord Shiva, the presiding deity of Varanasi. Vijnanananda asked him, "Why did this accident happen to me? I have come to your city, to Varanasi, to do Sri Ramakrishna's work. That is an unselfish action." Then after midnight, at around 1 or 2 a.m., Swami Vijnanananda had a vision of Lord Shiva. Shiva, who had matted hair and a smiling face. Swami Vijnanananda asked Lord Shiva if he had come to take him away. Swami Vijnanananda said that he still had Sri Ramakrishna's work to do. Shiva came forward and embraced Swami Vijnanananda. Immediately his body became cold as ice. Lord Shiva then laughed and left. The next morning, Swami Vijnanananda didn't have a temperature, and his wounds had almost healed. Swami Vijnanananda said that even now, sometimes I see the calm, smiling face of Lord Shiva. Vision of Buddha in Sarnath in 1918. While Vijnanananda was in Varanasi, he traveled to Sarnath. Sarnath is close to Varanasi and is famous for its Buddhist architecture. It was the place where Buddha had preached his first sermon on the middle path. While looking at an image of Buddha, Vijnanananda had a vision. He saw a formless ocean of light into which the whole universe was merging. Swami Vijnanananda saw himself as a speck on the bank of formless ocean. In a universe completely disappeared. From the ocean of pure consciousness, the form of Buddha emerged. This brought a lot of joy to Swami Vijnanananda. Later, Swami Vijnanananda went to the Vishwanath temple. There he thought, why have I come here? To see a stone. Then the same vision opened up. Swami Vijnanananda felt that Lord Vishwanath was telling him, the light is the same here as there in Sarnath. Truth is one. These are just some of the visions that we have on record of Swami Vijnanananda's spiritual experiences. Swami Chetanananda describes more. He might have had much more than what is recorded, but these remain with Swami Vijnanananda. Consecration of the Ramakrishna temple at Belur Math and the end. Swami Vivekananda worshipped Sriji, or the relics of Sri Ramakrishna, on 9 December 1898 at Belur Math. Swami Shivananda, the second president of the Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission, laid the foundation stone to the new temple on 13 March 1929. The new temple site was later selected in July 1935. Swami Vijnanananda had to relay the stone to where the current temple stands. On 12 January 1938, Swami Vijnanananda came to Belur Math from Allahabad to consecrate the new temple. After the consecration, Swami Vijnanananda had another vision which featured Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, Rakal Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda, Mahapurush Maharaj, Swami Shivananda, Sarat Maharaj, Swami Saradananda, Hari Maharaj, Swami Turiyananda, Gangadhar Maharaj, Swami Akhandananda, and others standing in the southwest corner watching the ceremony. After describing the vision to his attendants, he said, quote, now my work is over. Today I am relieved of the responsibility that Swamiji has entrusted to me. Swami Vijnanananda returned to Belur Math for Sri Ramakrishna's birth anniversary. His health had already started to deteriorate. His feet began to swell and he was diagnosed with infectious dropsy. On 8 March 1938, Swami Vijnanananda returned to Allahabad. Swami Vijnanananda was like a traditional sadhu. He did not take his medicines or listen to the doctor's advice towards the end. He passed away at 3:20 p.m. on Monday, 25 April 1938. So this is a talk on Swami Vijnanananda, and he also, because of the spiritual status that he had achieved, could have begun an organization on his own, but he didn't. He lived within the shelter of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. Thank you.